Hi, welcome to City at a Glance. I'm your host, David Young, and with us, as always, is our city manager, Darren Atterbury. Darren, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, David.
Today we have a very exciting topic that we're going to be discussing, which is capital projects that are taking place in the city right now. And joining us to discuss this, we have our Director of Infrastructure Services, Rick Richter. Rick, thank you for being here.
Thank you, David.
And then also John Hawkes, who is with us from the Water Engineer, Field Operations Manager. So just to begin, we have a lot of different projects going on right now throughout the city. Darren, can you kind of talk about some of those projects and their importance, why they're important to the city of Fort Collins?
Yeah, well, I probably am not the one that should be talking about the projects. These two guys are the experts and the ones that have real-time information. I will talk about the importance of the project. So I think our capital planning efforts, the work that we're doing in terms of infrastructure improvements during this nice weather season is really, really important. We talk about world-class municipal services, but to provide those services, you need the capital in place to do that. So what I appreciate about the work that you guys are doing on a daily basis right now during these seasons is, as I look at it, it's really execution of our strategic plan and our community vision. So the community engages deeply in the planning for these projects. And all the master plans that drive the projects that John and Rick and their teams are building right now and our contractors. And then as the citizens are involved in that, certainly the council has a very significant role, and that's the appropriating the dollars for that, and then as I mentioned, also setting the strategic plan. So when these guys come out and their crews come out to do a project, in many cases there's years of planning that goes in advance of that. So we don't build projects just because we think something needs to be updated. Typically, it's part of an asset management system that we have or a long-range master plan. So when it gets to this level, there's been a lot of work that's gone on. And also, I think one of the things we probably should talk about is also the not only the progress and moving forward and improvements in services, but also we recognize, and Rick and John for sure, the impact that construction has on our community. So hopefully we'll get a chance to talk a little bit about that. But I just want to start and tell you guys how much I appreciate the work that you're doing leading up to this point and your teams. And I think our public should know that not only are you part of the planning and the systems development and then the plans development, but then the holding our contractors accountable and our coworkers for the work that needs to be done and making sure we're getting a good deal and a great product and one that's going to sustain. So I just want to say how much I appreciate that and just the professional way in which you guys do your jobs and your teams do your jobs and the way you're leading. So thanks for the work. I look forward to the discussion.
Certainly. And with that in mind, these projects do take years to come to fruition, so it is exciting to see some of these come to life, and at the same time they do have a great impact on majority of residents who live here in Fort Collins. So residents are now seeing the impacts as well. So with that in mind, Rick and John, just kicking things off, talk about some of the specific projects. What are we seeing going on within the city right now that are impacting people?
Sure, thank you, David. I'll start with some of the transportation projects. One of the projects that we're excited about is a project at Timberline and Prospect. It's an intersection improvement. That project is underway and will be completed in the early fall, and that includes some intersection improvements as well as some improvements on Timberline Road from Prospect South. It'll add some bike lanes, pedestrian facilities, and widen the roadway out. So that's a really exciting project. That is the final Building on Basics project from the previous tax that was passed. So this quarter-cent tax is funding this project, and it's the final project of that initiative. We also have some work going on at Shields and Drake. This is an intersection project. This is a high bicycle accident location, and so as we do our intersection analysis, this will improve the bike safety as well as the vehicle safety in that area, and that project will again be completed in early fall. One of the things that we're doing in mid-July is a repair of the railroad crossing across LeMay near Riverside. That's been a very difficult crossing and a lot of frustrations for folks, and it's going to be an impact for a few days, but it'll be great to get that improvement done.
Definitely. And I know that you've been going out this summer, you've been presenting and talking about the projects and the impacts that they have on the community. You know, highlighting some of the differences between previous years and this year. Can you guys kind of speak to that in terms of what we're seeing this summer as opposed to previous summers for residents who may be out and about and saying, what's the deal? What's going on here?
I'll talk a little bit about 2015. It was a very difficult year. We had a lot of projects. A lot of the north-south arterials through the city were affected with either with detours or closures. We built a significant section of North College in 2015, and then the county did a significant improvement on Shield Street north of Vine and replaced the Poudre River Bridge. The Colorado Department of Transportation replaced the Poudre River Bridge at Mulberry. So those are some major improvements that needed to be done, but were very impactful to folks. And so one of the things we're trying to do this year is to focus our work on one corridor, which is the Prospect Corridor. And so we got together and talked about how do we limit those closures to one roadway. There's a lot of work going on around the city, but we've tried to limit the closures to the Prospect Corridor. And we have some major projects on Prospect. I know, John,
Yep.
there's some improvements out near I-25 on Prospect.
Yeah, Rick and I met at least a year and a half ago, and we made a conscious decision when we saw our upcoming workload that we were going to concentrate these Prospect projects in 2016 and try to, we had heard a lot of feedback from citizens of projects that one gets completed and the next one just follows right behind it and closes the road again. And so we wanted to take a little more focused, coordinated effort. We've got a large bridge project happening out near I-25, both for the creek and for a flood control structure. That's a coordinated project between engineering and utilities. We did a crossing of Prospect at Stover. That was another storm sewer project while this whole process was going on, while we had some closures done, to really impact the, instead of having multiple projects over a few years, we were, kind of concentrate that and try to get as much done as we could this summer. We expect the box culverts project to be completed later this fall. Hope to have the road open by the end of summer so that we can use that Prospect Corridor again. There'll continue to be some work on the area as it goes forward. A lot of the work you're seeing out there is sometimes in preparation of large projects. If you recall the water line project on College Avenue, which was actually 2 years ago now, that was in preparation of what CDOT is doing along College Avenue. Other projects that we've just recently completed a storm sewer outfall at Lincoln and Willow. It had that intersection and that crossing closed for a little while, again in advance of other transportation projects, the Lincoln Corridor, the Lincoln Bridge, things like that. And then Utilities also has a number of projects that the public doesn't necessarily see but has a huge impact on our delivery of services. Everything from improvements at the Drake wastewater reclamation facility, chlorine contact basin at the water plant, and a new tunnel to improve our supply of raw water up on the Michigan Ditch at Cameron Pass.
Definitely.
It's a significant, significant project that most Fort Collins residents don't see. And it'll be a tremendous security improvement and a reliability improvement.
Long-time resiliency of this utility. A lot of these projects look at that, and we're not looking 20 years, we're looking 50, 100 years out into the future.
And I imagine when you are doing that, you're bringing other people into the picture, I would think, and you're collaborating with people, and you're working with CDOT and CSU and various partners throughout the community. Can you kind of talk about that as you plan these projects? How you kind of work with the other entities throughout the community?
Sure.
We start planning about 2 years in advance, and as John mentioned, we've been talking about Prospect for over a year and a half.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of other agencies, as you mentioned, that come in. We also have private utilities,
That's right.
the gas suppliers and communication suppliers and cable TV suppliers that we work with. And it's not only to communicate that we're doing the project, but we have opportunities to leverage projects. So if we're doing a project that'll be upcoming, then they can do their work in advance. And as John mentioned, there have been opportunities where utilities move some of their projects up so they can facilitate our street maintenance or our transportation repairs, or we adjust our transportation repair schedule to fit the utility schedule. So we're already talking in depth about 17. We've been talking about it for several months, and so we're looking at that as well as the potential of 5-year plans for all of our improvements, and then how do you coordinate those projects at a longer range.
Yeah.
Yeah. And more than just that, we look at what is going to happen around the city and how will a detour for one project affect another project. So it has a little bit of a domino effect that we have to kind of step back and take a bigger picture on. We've had to delay some projects that were on a planned detour route, recognizing, we had this, issue last year where all the north-south routes seem to have some project. We're learning from that. We're addressing that. We're trying to take that big picture view and make sure we can keep people moving throughout the city.
Definitely.
A question that I get frequently is, why does a project go in and then a street's torn up? And I know you've been doing a lot of work over the last few years about that. And then also, I think one thing we're not going to talk a lot about, John just alluded to it, is the private sector projects that are going on. So oftentimes people see construction and they think city, but there's a lot of private development projects that need to occur to get the infrastructure and street engineering connected. And we're not going to talk a whole lot about that because there's so many city projects to talk about. The other thing, Rick, I think, so if you could speak to, just because I think people be interested, are we coordinating so that we don't have a double cut? And then the other thing that's the biggest project, one of the biggest projects out there is College Avenue and the resurfacing. And you might want to just touch on that a little bit, but I'll tell you from my perspective, and it's so great to get calls from citizens saying, thank you for the resurface, and now I can safely ride my motorcycle on College Avenue or whatever. But I know that's a phenomenal work on the part of CDOT. But can you touch on both of those?
I would. To the idea of just getting done paving a road and then cutting the road, which has been an issue for years, and that's really the impetus for us doing this coordination. Now, is it possible for a water main to break and not predict it after a road's paved? Occasionally that happens, and nobody plans that. It's a circumstance, but it's seldom. And I think the idea is to eliminate all the planned work and make sure that if there are those issues, there are emergencies and things that could be helped. So we spend a lot of time coordinating, and as I mentioned, the 5-year plans will help that. In our street maintenance program, we have a 5-year plan. Water and sewer plans and stormwater plans are a 5-year plan. Light and Power is working on a 5-year plan. As we get all those plans together, that's what will help us eliminate those potential cuts and projects. And you touched a little bit on the development projects. Those are tougher to predict. We don't control when those happen, and so we really try to look at those. We address those in our coordination meetings, but sometimes we're not in charge of the timing, and so we have to react to those timing issues. But we're really improving our ability to coordinate any cuts that may happen on the street and get those done ahead of time. And to talk about the College Avenue project, this is a Colorado Department of Transportation resurfacing project, and it really is from Harmony Road to Mulberry, and it covers the entire corridor through the Midtown, Fort Collins. There's been work going on over the last 3 years. John mentioned the water line replacement. There's been utility upgrades and other things that have happened in advance of this work. A lot of the concrete curb and gutter and sidewalk work was done last year. And so they're doing the paving, the actual milling and paving this year. They're doing night work for a majority of the project. This is probably Prospect south to Harmony. And so they come in late in the evening, do the milling and the paving, and the road's back open by 6 in the morning, and they're leaving a lane open, but they're dropping lanes during the night, which is a great benefit, keeping the business access and those types of things. And they're making great progress. They hope to be done in late summer with that project. There is some pretty substantial work being done on the north end of that project between University and Mulberry. They have to remove the pavement and the curb and gutter and fix some of the drainage issues, which is a major impact to those folks, and it's down to 1 lane.
Yeah.
And they're working hard to try to get that work done and get that back open. But we've been looking for this to happen, I think, in the city of Fort Collins for the last 10 years. It's been needed, and we're really happy that that improvement is happening this year.
In fact, it's been the worst rated road surface in Fort Collins, so this will be a big fix. My wife and I were driving by the site one night last week, and one of the things we are concerned about, obviously, is safety in any construction project, and at night as well. And we just noticed how visible their work sites were, and how visible the employees were, and the equipment and the lighting. It was very, very impressive. And it's a good opportunity to just say also, as people who are watching, there are so many distracted drivers out on the road right now, and our crews are out there, and private crews, and CDOT and others, and when you're going near a construction zone, just be very cognizant. These are our next door neighbors and our coworkers, and I've heard so many stories about people that are out distracted driving, very decent human beings, but they're texting and they're not paying attention, and one split second ends up, we lose a coworker or a neighbor. And so I think that, it's pretty important, and I know you guys are focusing with your team so much on safety, but, it's give them a break. Give those construction workers out there, give them a break and pay close attention.
Yeah.
You look like you...
Well, yeah, it's an appeal to the public to give a little more thought when you're driving near construction zones. The people working there live here. They're not contractors coming in from elsewhere. They're generally citizens, just like you and I. And as you said, they're our neighbors. And you're going to be through the construction zone and very quickly. Just please give a little extra attention during that period.
And it's also good to note, too, for pedestrians as well as cyclists who are traversing those areas, too, to watch out and kind of keep a heads up, not just keep your eye on your phone as you're walking and walk into a construction zone. So for any mode of transportation, definitely make sure to keep a heads up.
We're beginning to do some additional outreach for pedestrians,
exactly.
bicycles.
Yeah.
Thank you to your group. Because those construction zones do apply to everyone, not just vehicles.
Yep, precisely. Yeah. Well, there's obviously a lot going on, and you guys are very strategic in your work and have meticulously planned everything that is going on. Kind of paint a picture of the future of Fort Collins, like what this will look like when it's all done. This is why we are doing this. So what can folks look forward to?
When is this construction going to end, you guys?
Not in the near future. We do have goals for these projects, and certainly congestion reduction is one of the goals. We do a arterial intersection analysis, and as we develop these projects, we look at congestion reduction. So that's one of the main drivers. Certainly safety for bikes, peds, vehicles, and transit is another driver. We've got a very robust sidewalk program and adding a lot of sidewalk filling gaps, pedestrian access ramps, those types of things. So I think we're going to see a more porous city, a city that you can walk, ride your bike, transit, or drive your vehicle. And that's really the goal. That's the long-term big picture goal. That comes from little pieces, right? And so it's always easy to say that's the goal, but that's what we're going to see long-term. We've got some very exciting projects in 2017. John mentioned the Lincoln Corridor project, which is really between LeMay and Willow Street, including a new bridge over the Poudre River. That project will kick off here in a couple months and go through 2017. So really excited about that project. We've got some work at College and Prospect. Certainly Colorado State University is building a medical center. They'll be doing some improvements. We have some storm sewer and other improvements at that intersection that we'll see. We'll continue with our bridge program. We do a couple bridges every year, and so we're going to have some bridges on the docket for 2017. We're still working on the exact ones. Those are under design. So there'll be some great work being done. One thing that I have not mentioned is there's a pedestrian underpass that was built on College Avenue adjacent to the Foothills Mall, and we hope that construction will kick off later this summer. And we're excited about getting the pedestrian underpass in, get that facility built. And we have not talked about the CSU projects. There are a lot of projects at Colorado State University that affect the traveling public. As you might have noticed, there's been a pedestrian underpass under Prospect at Center,
right.
which is working towards construction of getting that paving done. There are other improvements that will happen, and then at the final completion of those projects, we'll be doing a street maintenance project on Prospect, especially from College to Shields, and then also on Lake from College to Shields. So some of those will happen in 2017. So there'll still be some excitement in that area.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're looking at our long-range master plans. Darren, you mentioned early on asset management. That's a big driver of ours. We've got a lot of aging infrastructure that needs improvements. We're balancing, not only the funding availability, the needs, but also the acceptance of the public for how much construction can they, handle.
Yeah.
And so all of that works into it, coordination with other departments, other agencies. It all becomes part of it. We're looking at developing a long-range plan. Well, we have that long-range plan of really neighborhood improvements, where we're not doing a block here and a block, on the other side of town. We're going to work on neighborhoods together, coordinated with our street maintenance program to pave those as soon as we get out of there, and just work through systematically based on our worst needs first. We've got some long-range stormwater and flood mitigation projects that will serve kind of the Old Town Central area that we're putting into our budget offers and our long-range planning, and seeing how we can program that out over the next, not only 17, but really our next 10, 15 years.
David, one of the things I was thinking about is people are watching and listening all these projects and all this activity. How does it get paid for? Can you guys just talk a
good
little bit
question.
about
Yeah,
how
the funding.
the various funding strategies and partnerships that generally that you see?
Well, utilities are enterprise funds, so we're completely rate supported. Depending on the amount of capital work that we want to do, we do look at some alternative funding sources. It could be bonds or other means. We'll look for grants. It's not as available for utilities. And as more often than not, we will just really save up until we have the funds to do that work. We have our rate structures set up to do a certain amount of asset replacement every year. We can kind of stay ahead or kind of status quo right now. We'd like to advance some of our asset replacement as we're growing, as there's increased need for services. We need to adapt and keep up. So we'll partner with some of the general funded projects, and I think that really helps leverage both of our funds, where we're not going in at separate times. I always like to do that where the utility is tearing up a road. Well, we can share in the surface restoration costs, and it really helps both of our areas.
One thing you may want to mention also is the developer contributions. So there's the ratepayers, but then as development occurs, what about their portion of that?
As development occurs, we charge what's called a plant investment fee. It's really a buy-in to the system. It helps our capital costs, make sure that our infrastructure is sized appropriately, has enough capacity to deliver services that these new developments, this expansion is needing. That works into some of our funding sources also. And development constantly has an impact. We try to keep some flexibility in our programs where a development comes in and is going to impact a utility that we were planning to replace 2 or 3 years out. We may be able to advance that project and do a little bit more cooperative work there also. So yes, good
That
point.
makes sense.
Yeah, the transportation funding is probably a little trickier. I don't know that we have very few projects that have one funding source. So we do a lot of grant applications, and we look to have about 25 to 30% of our budget funded through grants, and this is an ongoing process. You have to apply and you have to plan out 2 or 3 or 4 years in advance. So we do a lot of grant funding. We have certainly a quarter-cent capital tax that helps fund road projects. We also have a transportation impact fee that helps pay for the construction of arterial and collector roadways. So it's a combination of all those funds. Certainly the general fund funds some projects directly, so it's usually a variety of funding sources that come together as we plan these projects. And, you know, we're looking at funding maybe 2 to 3 or 4 years out in advance.
Well, we're almost out of time, but real quick, I'd be remiss without mentioning that the quality of our roads is very good, if I'm remembering correctly. Can you guys just speak to like the rating of our roads? If I
Sure.
recall, we've got a pretty high rating of our roads.
You know, we've it's a subject dear to my heart because I've worked
Yeah.
in the asset management field for 15 years. But we've have a process where we do the appropriate treatment for each road at the appropriate time is kind of the whole goal. It's been funded, and the citizens of Fort Collins have stepped up and funded the street maintenance over the last 25 years. And so we do have a good quality road. We have a level of service B, which is a fairly high rating, and our goal is to keep that level of service. We test the roads every 3 years and go through a process to evaluate it. We just completed that process, and it is in the level of service B window. And so, yeah, they're good. And I know, as Darren mentioned, College Avenue was probably the worst rated road in the city, so we're going to have to find another road that we relate to when we talk about the worst rated road. But it is a high level, and the citizens expect that, and they should, because they have stepped up with the approval of the sales tax funding and the funding for street maintenance.
Yeah, and that's something you tend to forget sometimes, that there is that B rating and the roads are so good until you go to another community or area and you see those potholes and roads that aren't as in good a shape. So definitely. Well, thank you all for joining us today. We appreciate it. A very interesting issue that impacts everybody in Fort Collins. To wrap things up, is there anything you would like to add, Darren, or anybody?
A couple of things I think about, and I've said this many times on this show. I think one is we've inherited a great system. So I look at John and Rick, and they're stewards for these systems with all of your colleagues, and it takes a lot of people to do this. And I think about what we've inherited. And we inherited a great system, and we inherited good planning and great engineering and great execution. And so these two guys are responsible, and their colleagues, to carry that out and to build onto the future. So that inheritance, I think, is so important. And so as we think about also the next generation, as we hand this forward, we've got to have it in as good, if not better shape than when we received it. And then I also can't help in this conversation to just restate this importance of planning and building. So I've said this, many communities plan, but put their plans on a shelf. Many communities build and don't have a plan to do that. And what I really appreciate about Fort Collins is that we've had a history of planning and then building those plans. And I think that's, over many decades, ends up being a great community. And then I'll just finish with, again, for the viewers, just the competency that you guys have in your jobs, and the quality of coworkers that you have, and the contractors that you work with. I'll just say, I think we're in great hands. I really appreciate your work and your leadership, Rick, and yours as well, John. I think your teams are doing phenomenal work, and I think you guys are leading with excellence, and I just appreciate it. And I know this is a very impactful time for your teams and for the community. And so just keep up the good work and do all you can to mitigate the traffic impacts and and ensure safety on our work sites. Appreciate what you guys are doing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's been City at a Glance. Make sure to drive safe out there, slow down when you enter those construction zones, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you very much.